Thanks for joining me for the Pray for Micah podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review, and check out my YouTube channel and follow me on social media. Pray for Micah Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And now, on with the show.
Welcome to the Pray for Micah podcast. And now your host, Micah Chrisman.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pray for Micah podcast, where we explore art, activism, spirituality, and our cosmic insignificance/significance. I'm here with Katharine Strange, and she is a writer and activist based in Seattle, Washington. Her writing focuses on questioning received wisdom, particularly around marginalized groups and experiences. Her new Substack, Heretic Hereafter, focuses on spiritual next steps for those transitioning away from evangelicalism. She hopes that her work will lead readers to examine prejudices, expand empathy, and at least once laugh hard enough to pee themselves. Katharine, am I going to pee myself today? Are you going to make me laugh so hard that I that I pee myself a little bit?
Now that I say that, I'm like, no, it's probably not going to be funny at all. We'll give it a try.
This is why I could never do like stand-up comedy, because if I have to be funny intentionally, I know that I'll just bomb every single time. But if I just let it happen kind of organically, like here on this show, then might work out better. Although it's hard to make me pee myself. It's a goal that I feel like somebody should have in their life. Like I'd like to laugh so hard I at least pee myself once,
I'm a mom and I have a lot of friends who are moms. So I'm going to say, like, maybe you need to be targeting, if we're making people pee themselves, to target moms, like much easier to make us pee. So
yeah, with my digestion issues, I'm more likely to shit myself, I feel like, than pee myself. Just,
That's also funny. So we could go for that.
Too much coffee and go to a comedy show and they're like, ooh, I get this guy out of here. He's something died in his pants,
No.
Well, Katharine, thanks for joining me on the show today. Yeah. I wanted to kind of explore a little bit with you about your past and what brought you to Seattle, Washington, ultimately. And I do have to give a caveat though to my listeners. I've actually have just been getting over COVID. So if I sound nasally congested, if I make some really nasty, weird noises, it's because I survived. I cheated death this week. And I in fact, I was telling a friend, I was like, it hasn't been too bad. I know there's been friends and people who've really had really bad, symptomatic, reactions to COVID. For me, though, just as a confession, I'm a smoker. And so I was particularly struggle with breathing. But there were some days where, they talked about how it was such a weird experience because I remember them all these 3 years that the pandemic's been going on. This is my first time. I've never had COVID. And so this is my first time having it. But I remember the news and doctors and people were saying that people get this kind of hypoxia, kind of happy, euphoric almost reaction because the lack of oxygen to the brain kind of thing. And so there's a couple times I would smoke a cigarette and it felt just a little extra, it hit just a little extra, goodness to it, I almost felt like I was kind of tripping for a second, having a little psychedelic experiences. And I was just like, maybe I should enjoy this a little bit more, before I die, because this is a bad sign that I'm enjoying this cigarette too much while having lack of oxygen. And so it's like, did he really have COVID or did he just discover a new kink? Just friends come find me in my bathroom and I've got a bag over my head. Just
oh my God.
just trying out new things, people. COVID. Hey, you only live once, right?
That's true, yeah. Don't go toward the white light, okay?
Don't go toward the white light. Yeah.
Yeah.
My cat just is slowly stroking the side of my face while I dying, you know. That's
If you're lucky, you know, I think my cats would probably eat me if I died. So
right. Oh yeah, no, this my cat Puma for sure. Like he already tries to eat me regularly, just like kind of like let me like just chew on your hand a little bit.
mm.
So and he doesn't have an automatic food dispenser, so I know that if anything were to happen to me, I'd be the first. I'd be the first to get munched on for sure by Pumbaa. He would be the first one. My dog would just like eat the cat afterwards, you know.
And that's beautiful. That's like the circle of life. And yeah, part of you would live on inside
And
your
my
cat, inside
pets.
your dog. Yeah, I don't know.
My poor mother's listening to this podcast, and she's probably gonna be like, "Do I need to come check on you afterwards? In fact, you sound a little delirious." And so yeah, that's why like I had to give that kind of precursor to the show, because as Catherine was, she was like, "Do you have an emergency contact in case you die during the episode? Like if I just pass out, you know?" Just like, no, just call Kansas City, just the number, you
You're
know,
like,
just
Micah,
Kansas
he needs
City.
help.
He needs help. He's dying in the
There's a
virtual world.
podcaster down.
And the world would probably go on just fine. The podcast, you know, oh no, we lost another white male. Oh geez, another podcasting white male. God.
No, there'd be a huge hole in the podcasting
Yes.
community, I'm sure.
Thank you, Catherine. I appreciate that. That makes me feel good about death and, you know, my cat and dog eating me, and
Mhm.
hopefully not in front of you, not on the camera. So, you know.
I mean, is this video recording? This could be, I mean, this could be a big viral hit. I mean, I don't want to encourage you to go down that path, but
You know, if I die, you know, and that's I did what I loved. At least people will know, you know, that.
Mhm.
And at least here, I've got all the pets actually shut out the door, so they can't eat me for at least, you know, until they break down the door, I guess, into my office. So the viral sensation that would be my pets eating me, I guess I should just, as I'm dying, just kind of like open the door and just kind of feast on my body. My
the
pretty
last act, yes.
the last act was an act of mercy. He gave his pets a chance to eat. Well, now that I've gone down a weird dark place,
Yeah.
Catherine, tell us about yourself. Kind of where did you grow up at? What brought you, to Seattle, and what got you into the writing? I mean, you could take one at a time, or you could do all three of those questions. Basically, summarize your life for us. You know.
Let's do it. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I should also say, very excited to be talking to you. Yeah, so I'm an Army brat. So I grew up in a lot of different places. The biggest chunk of my childhood in one place was spent in Western Montana, Missoula, if anybody out there is familiar with Montana. Yeah, and then I being kind of a weirdo queer kid in a small town was like, I'm gonna get out of here and I'm gonna move to the big city. And for those of us like west of the Continental Divide, I guess the Pacific Northwest, that's Seattle. So I was like, oh my God, yeah, Seattle, if I can make it there. So I moved to Seattle when I was 18 to attend a small Christian liberal arts college. And at that point in my life, I was really like, I'm going to be an actress. God is calling me to be an actress. Did a couple years of, a theater major, realized like, being an actor is actually super hard. I think harder if you're not independently wealthy and like a size 0. But I had a fallback plan at Christian college, which was to get my MRS degree. So I got married. And then my my brand new husband, got laid off from his job. So we ended up moving around Europe for like 5 years while he did a master's degree. Yeah. And then we eventually moved to Canada, had a couple kids, and then his family is still in the Seattle area. We got tired of sitting at the Canadian border for like several hours every month. So we decided to move back to Seattle. And yeah, now I'm doing a little bit of several different things. I have 2 kids. One is 10 and one is 8. So I'm taking care of them a lot of the time. I'm writing. I do some freelancing, and I've been doing a lot of like memoir writing and now the Substack this year. And then I do some activism, particularly around racial integration in public schools, or any schools really, which a lot of people think like, oh, isn't racial segregation kind of a thing, not a thing anymore since Brown v. Board of Education? But surprisingly, even in a very progressive city like Seattle, still a huge issue. So
really,
yeah, it's crazy. I always thought like, oh, Seattle is like my liberal dream oasis. And yeah, I just get here. I'm like, oh, people are also racist in Seattle. It's just they don't talk about it the same way, maybe. I don't know.
right. I feel like I had that same perception of like New York and like just upper East Coast, like, you know, oh, they're so progressive, and how could it be so racist? And then you like read these like Department of Justice reports of the police and just all the shit that and with gentrification happening, you know, in Brooklyn, all these places, like it's just pushing people out. So there's a lot of segregation in the school district, you're saying, in Seattle still.
Yeah, and New York as well. I think New York City might be the worst segregation in the country as far as schools go. Seattle's an interesting city. It's a very it's like long and skinny, because it's like you've got the ocean on one side and you've got Lake Washington on the other. So it's this long, skinny piece of land, and because of like a lot of historical like legalized segregation, like redlining and things like that, you have a lot of white people in the north end and then a lot of people of color in the south end. And so the schools are segregated, and they had a lot of court ordered desegregation after Brown v. Board of Education in the 50s. But basically some white and privileged parents from Seattle sued the school district in, I want to say, the late 90s, because one of their kids did not get into his number one choice of high school, and like race was used as a tiebreaker in deciding these things, and he was a white kid. And so that case went to the Supreme Court, bundled with a case from Louisville. And the Supreme Court said, oh, you can't use race to decide whether schools are segregated. So they struck that, struck down the system, which is crazy. But probably similar good things going to happen with the latest Supreme Court case with the was marriage? It the Harvard students? No, I was thinking of the affirmative action one.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
I knew it.
I was like, I couldn't remember what. I thought there was something just recently that they voted on that ratified and like finally put it like officially, like that it's okay to be to marry interracially and like basically to like protect homosexual marriages as well. And it just blows my mind that whatever it was, like 13 or something, like there are still people who voted against ratifying that. And it's like, and you know, they might try to make the justification, well, no, we're for the interracial but not the, you know, protecting LGBTQ marriage stuff. But it's like you still voted against, like, you're just an asshole and you're racist because you're literally voting against like interracial marriage, and it's 2022. Like, what the fuck? You know, like, you're voting against it. Like, your name is on this docket saying you voted against this will be marked in history. Like, so yeah, I don't know if you know this about Kansas City, but we were like the blueprint for like the rest of the country for like communal like segregation, like redlining, like as far as JC Nichols was the guy who basically made the country club plaza, like our country club like district over here in Kansas City. And we still have a very like segregated, like basically they call it the Truce Corridor. It's kind of changed now. It's, you know, the Northland River / you know, more Prospect area street here. But it's like, it's something crazy as far as like the data that shows that if you live in Kansas City, between like the lowest life expectancy zip code and the highest life expectancy zip code is separated by 2 miles. Like, and it's a 13-year gap. So those 2 miles, if you live over here, you're projected to die 13 years earlier than 2 miles away if you live in this like, yeah. higher what did I just say? Living. This is like the weird part about COVID. It really has been like there's moments where like my brain just like the oxygen just like disappears. Yeah, life expectancy. That's the word.
Yeah.
I was like, so yeah, it's a pretty fucked up situation here, but it's interesting that it's been replicated and mastered everywhere else probably as well. And so
Yeah.
the generation's going to take to undo that. So from your work, like as you
Mm.
see yourself as a white woman, how have you like what got you into like seeing the injustice of the world and wanted to like, hey, do something about it? Was there like a moment? Was there like more of a gradual, like as you kind of did your studies or what have you? Like kind of share with us a little bit like what made you want to use your writing and your expertise to kind of look at racial disparities or injustices and in relation to, I'm assuming, your spiritual beliefs too. So yeah, let's go. Let's just jump right into that.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I grew up like a lot of white kids, especially like in the 80s and 90s, like just super oblivious to racism and thinking, yeah, that was a thing that happened in the past and doesn't affect us anymore. I mean, I remember being like excited when Obama was elected, but probably part of me was also like, oh, great, racism handled. We're done now.
Solved.
No problem. So yeah, that was so great if we did that. But yes, I think I mean, I did see like a lot of different moving around a lot as a kid. I did see different areas where kids were more or less integrated. And one thing about the military, for all its, it's got a lot of problems for sure, but it is pretty racially integrated, than probably more so than most people's everyday lives.
Sure.
But I think the big thing for me was during Ferguson, when Michael Brown's mother was talking about her son. And I just I think my kids were super little at that point. And it was just like, I think I remember her talking about like, she had worked so hard to like raise her son and like how many odds were stacked against her. And then like, just to have him taken like that. And like, as a new mom who was like really going through it, I mean, as a white mom in a different situation, but I related to her so much that, and I just really thought like, oh my God, like this is real. This is happening. And we need to do something about it. I was still living in Canada at the time, and Canada definitely has a different history than America, but also a lot of racism, and particularly a lot of issues with Indigenous communities.
Right.
But we moved back to Seattle a year before Trump was elected. I was curious to learn more about racism. And I was lucky enough to meet a few friends actually through a Lutheran church I was attending at the time who were involved in kind of educating this like very white Lutheran community about racism. And I started volunteering with them. I learned a lot. And this organization was called Kids and Race. It's no longer functioning, unfortunately. But I learned a lot from them. And then when my husband and I, our oldest kid was 4, we were doing like the mad scramble to like try and figure out where he was going to go to school. And we were like looking to buy a house. And we started like house hunting in Seattle. It was just like, we met like one realtor who basically wouldn't show us houses in South Seattle.
Really?
There's like this, yeah, it's crazy. There's like, they'll make some comment to you like, oh, well, and you have kids, so you're interested in schools, or you're looking for a good school. And that's like very coded language, what means schools where kids are mostly white and mostly middle class. And just through this Kids and Race organization and some other, like the work of Nicole Hannah Jones, who is she did also the 1619 Project. But before that, she also did some things for This American Life about school segregation. And so like I had just was kind of like keyed into that language, and I just been like, what do you mean by that? Like, why don't I want to live in South Seattle? So we ended up buying a house in South Seattle. We live down here. My kids attend a school that is like 4% white or something. And then the neighborhood is gentrifying a lot. And there's also that issue, like as like a white middle class family, that's another thing that my family has to be aware of. But it's been really amazing, I think, to live in a in this community, which is really diverse, ethnically, racially, a lot of different languages, a lot of immigrants in my neighborhood. And it's been amazing. And so I guess a lot of my work now is just talking to other white and privileged parents and being like, it's okay. Your kids can go to school with Black kids. Everything will be fine. They will get a great education. Like, calm down. Like, everything you've been told about so-called good schools is actually a lot of bullshit. So,
Right. Isn't that crazy how it always comes back to like education and housing, right? As far as like how racial discrimination still happens, why communities are still segregated. And while I understand like what you're saying, like with the gentrification problem being a legitimate problem for it, part of what the issue with gentrification is major developers. It's not the individual, families that are like yourself that are moving in that are like buying up whole blocks and renovating and flipping and doing things. Like I heard someone describe it as like it's not that the development itself is bad, but it's the rate. So like they call it the speed of white. like
I
instead
never
of
heard
like
that.
white flight, but like just like basically just the rush of white family or white communities moving back into these like historically disenfranchised neighborhoods that were disinvested. And well, now it's safe to move in because they have a gated parking lot and this multi-complex apartment property. And yeah, at the end of the day, we all have to live and exist somewhere. And me moving into a disenfranchised neighborhood isn't going to solve it by any means, but at least I don't know, to some degree, I think like when white families decided that I'm going to own this property, but I'm also going to invest in my community, those have to go hand in hand. But when you're just like I'm going to let these developers buy and get tax write-offs to develop in these major areas and push other families out and raise property taxes like for people who've been living there for decades, like it's crazy. I also didn't know this. I guess report came out a few years back, and folks can Google it. I can't remember exactly who it was done by. I think it was maybe it was Forbes or somebody who wrote about it, but I don't know if they weren't the ones who did the research. But basically, the generational like wealth of Black families will be reduced to zero by 2050 something, like literally, like and it all stems from like, hey, yeah, if you're a Black business owner in the 80s, you were thriving because you and your community were pulling those resources. But at some point, when the rest of society is deciding like you're in a red zone and we're not going to fund or give you a loan to start the next business or carry on like the family legacy, then it literally is it's killing Black wealth. And the boomers and all these other people who are so mad that we're like wanting student loans forgiven or this and that. It's like, you all were the fucking beneficiaries of like the GI Bill and all these other things that today's standards, like FDR's policies, would be considered radically socialist now. And so that's what they did. They were so worried that people of color were going to start getting benefiting from these policies that they started voting and stripping it away. And now they're just like, gonna yell and cuss out people at their, Applebee's. Just like,
Gosh,
like, give me my fucking jalapeno poppers, just like, it's like, no, like, anyways, I know one day I'm going to be that generation, or I don't know if you're a millennial, but I know one day, like, so I'm not trying to like shit on everybody in that generation, but it is just kind of one of those things. Like at some point, we will be the ones that everyone shits on because of climate change. So,
yeah.
We're all a byproduct of like the culture and society that we, were raised in, and yet we have to learn to adapt. So I'm not trying to give everyone a pass either. Like, oh, it's okay to be the racist grandparent, like boomer. Like, no, you have to realize, like, yeah, there was things in society that benefited you, and you trying to stop these other policies or things because of socialism, because of just this or that, like that's just shorthand for coded language, like you're saying, like oh, we want to keep our wealth and we don't want to give up our power or give up our hegemony like to some other group of people.
Yeah. Have you, did you read that book, The Sum of Us?
Oh, no.
I forget the author's name. She's brilliant. That's a really, like, she talks a lot about this problem is that, like, in our country, it's like white people always identify with other white people. Like, even if you're, low income, earning minimum wage white person, you identify with a white person who's like making 5 times as much money as you are. But really, it's like, one of the big like metaphors from her book is that so they had all these swimming pools that were built in the New Deal, and they're for everybody, but of course it was during Jim Crow, so like a lot of times Black people would and other people of color would not be allowed to use the swimming pool. So then after they passed laws to say, yeah, you have to let Black people swim in your swimming pools, instead of being like, okay, now everyone uses a swimming pool. Like, swimming pools closed across the country. They were like, okay, if we have to share this, we'll just completely destroy it. And instead, the white people will go swim at the country club that these people can't get into. And that's just like a metaphor for like what's happened to a lot of things in our country. I think with college as well, like college, like in the 70s and maybe even the 80s, it was, you could get into a state school and pay $500 a semester. And then when more people of color started going to school, then like, you see these ridiculous like tuition hikes. And now, it's these, everyone has debt now because of some of these issues. Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. That's interesting. I mean, it makes sense, but I've never thought about the cost of education being due to racism. I should just assume that by now. Like, if anything sucks in the world, it's probably because of racism,
Someone designed it that way.
Yeah.
They were like, how do we keep people down? They keep trying to rise up. I don't know. We'll think of something.
Right. And I guess her name's Heather McGee. I was just looking it up.
Heather McGee, yes.
I'm gonna have to read at that. Yeah. Wow. So as far as like with your own kids and thinking about their future and stuff, like, yeah, it sounds like you're real intentional with you and your husband, like where you guys lived and how you kind of give them exposure to the other worlds, other communities. Have they expressed, I mean, because you said they're 8 and 10 now.
Mm-hmm.
So have they expressed like any kind of like understanding or awareness of like racial like differences, even just like as kids do? Like I think my first experience with races, like it was probably racist, but it was a kid, it was like I was with my family friend, he was a Black guy, and we were hanging on the couch, and apparently I looked at him, I was just like, hey, why are you Black? And he's just like, I don't know.
Why are you white?
And then we just kept watching cartoons, like,
mm-hmm.
But I just think kids these days are, they're growing up faster and they have more social awareness with like media and just different things. Like, I don't know. I'm just curious what your thoughts are with like them. Like, how do you go about having those conversations as a parent?
Yeah, I think that's a really huge question, because I think for like, I'm 38, and I think a lot of people my age and even like fairly younger than me, we didn't grow up talking about race or racism. We learned that, it's be colorblind, and like, what's the phrase? Like, I don't care if you're Black or white or purple, like that kind of thing. And that's
we're all precious in His sight.
Yeah, right. Red and yellow, black and white. Oh my god.
Sorry, I didn't mean to trigger you. I didn't mean to. That was a Christian version of fighting racism. That was what it was.
It doesn't matter. Let's never talk about how our whole congregation is white. It doesn't matter because we don't see race.
Right.
Yeah. But so like, yeah, I think our teachers probably thought they were doing the right thing teaching us that, but it's just not adequate to just be like, race doesn't matter, end of story. And I do feel like I've been amazed actually to watch my kids, because they go to a school, and also really lucky to have a lot of teachers of color, which is actually pretty rare. There are not as many teachers of color as you would think, just because like there's a lot of historical reasons since the end of since Brown v. Board of Education. But their school talks about race. Their school celebrates different cultures, and like my kids will say like kind of weird things sometimes, and I just have to be like, we don't, that's not true. Like, one of my kids' best friends is Black, and they're playing outside this summer, and they were seeing who could stand on the hot sidewalk the longest, which is, like a very boy thing to do, I guess. And his friend could do it longer than he could. And my son said, well, like, you're cheating because your skin makes you not feel pain as much as mine does because you're Black. And I was like, like, I think in those moments, like, part of me is like, screaming, but I have to be like, calm. Like, I don't want to shame anybody. I'm like, actually, that's not true. There's a stereotype that Black people don't feel pain the same way white people do, but actually it's not true. We all feel pain the same. I think your friend is just better at standing on the hot sidewalk. Nothing to do with being Black. But it is interesting, like, how I think my kids, they definitely are learning things differently than I did. Like, I don't remember learning about, like, even Martin Luther King till I was probably in 2nd or 3rd grade. And my kids, I was actually kind of surprised, like, the first Martin Luther King assembly they had at their school, like, the kindergartners, they're reading a book about Martin Luther King and his assassination and, like, his funeral. And I was just at first kind of like, oh, we can't talk about assassination with kindergartners because, like, they're, our delicate little babies. But I think that's just kind of me, kind of projecting a lot of racial innocence onto kids, which is something I think especially white parents do. And kids really, they're a lot smarter than we give them credit for, and they're able to handle a lot more complexity than we give them credit for. So I think, like, they really benefit from hearing the whole story, even when it's not, even when it's like something that makes you sad or makes you think like, God, I wish it wasn't this way. I wish we had figured out all this racism shit and could hand you a better world. But just saying, like, yeah, my kids will see in the newspaper, like, a Black man was killed by a police officer. And it's like, okay, yeah, we talk about that. And, just letting them ask questions, trying not to, like, freak out if they say something kind of cringy. I'm sure I say cringy things too, and they don't freak out. So that's, it's just a lot of, like, and it's not just like one conversation, right? It's like all the time, whenever it comes up, just like being like, yeah, we can talk about this. It's not shameful. It's not bad. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to make mistakes about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, if we could have educated racism away, or created all the right conversation curriculums for things, it would have been gone by now, right? And that's, like, the reality is that what is contextually, like, working now and discussing racial divides or different things might not be the same thing that we can use tools in 30 years, 20, 50 years, like. And that's what sucks, is, like, realizing, like, oh, this is a multi-generational, like, construct created, especially in the context of the United States, and it's going to take multi-generations to unlearn it, undo it. And humanity is just really good at, like, creating new pathways for subjugation and disenfranchisement. And one could argue it's because it's tied to the whole country and fabric of it is tied to racial capitalism, which is like, your race is your class here. And so, and the fact that capitalism, dictates that there has to be an underclass and, a group of people that are at the bottom. And until we're able to just fully throw shit out the window, and I don't know, it's kind of one of those things where we would talk about it in, like, college speech and debate, like this anti-capitalism thing, and as we're arguing, we're, like, typing our notes on our MacBook Pros, and like, I get it, people, like, I'm using technology and rare earth minerals mined from other countries, and to have this conversation. I've heard of activists and people who are so radical that they were, like, writing their books and everything with typewriters, like, just for the fact of, like, and I just realized, like, at some point it becomes, unrealistic to be politically correct with everything in your life, as far as, like, what clothes you wear. And if I get that we should be conscious, right? Like, I'm not out here going out and buying blood diamonds, like, but it's just interesting how much globalization has made it literally impossible to not um even the foods we eat and who harvested and whether they were ethically and consciously like taken care of or paid. Like, have you seen the movie or the show The Good Place?
Yes, I was just thinking of that. I was like, yes,
Yeah,
it's like
that's
that
what
the tomato has like all these negative points attached to
exactly,
it, right?
exactly. If we live in a point system where, how many good things I do and how it's like the most righteous or healthy person was a guy who like, ate worms and like, like,
Why don't we do
uses
that?
compost to like build his huts or whatever. Like, it's like, I mean, how realistically could millions and millions of people live if that was like the case? And how could any of us get to heaven if that's the criteria to get there? Is like, is it the intent behind it if we bought the tomato and we knew it was, unethically harvested or accumulated? But I
Yeah.
guess that's a good segue into like the spiritual beliefs, because I don't know about you, but that was kind of like not on the woke point system, like that point was trying to make in the show, but just the idea that, hey, we're all sinners and we're all in need of grace, and uh yet when it came to living a good life, it still somehow always came back to a point system that was kind of,
Mm,
did you go to church, did you read the Bible, did you do things? So I'm curious, like, what was your religious experience growing up?
yeah. Yeah, I like the way that you put that. It does feel like a point system or like a checklist. Yeah, I was so in my military family, which moved around a lot. My dad was raised like he was like a Christmas and Easter Episcopal, which doesn't actually even count as Christian to a lot of people. So and my mom was raised Assemblies of God, so like kind of two ends, polar opposites of the religiosity scale. Like she was in the church every time the doors were open growing up, and like wasn't allowed to go see the movie Grease in the movie theater because like it's too evil.
Right.
So they tried to meet in the middle and raise us mostly in the Presbyterian church, a little bit of Baptist, kind of depending on where we were living and what we were doing at the time. But I do think like, I don't know, Presbyterians are kind of funny. They're like a mainline denomination, but they're very like they're Calvinist. Like they're very
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you are totally depraved, and it's you didn't even choose to love God. Like God picked you to be like to go to heaven, but you had nothing to do with it. There's just like nothing good about you at all. And I wouldn't say like the churches I attended were like super hardcore into like you're worthless or whatever. Mostly they were nice people. But I think I definitely absorbed a lot of that growing up, and just thought like, yeah, God really wants to send us all to hell. That's like number one thing he's looking forward to. And like, maybe you can kind of, if you are a good enough Christian, maybe he'll let you into heaven, just maybe. But I remember being very concerned as a kid with like being a good kid and doing the right things. And I think even now as an adult, like I'm an Enneagram 1. So yeah,
Okay,
that's like my
let's open the
where
Enneagram worm.
yes.
I was
So
gonna say,
yeah,
I
go
was gonna
ahead.
say just a funny joke. Just I saw this shirt once upon a time that said like Calvinism : no lives matter.
Oh my God.
Just like, you think you get to choose, and God, no, yeah, God says chooses who goes to heaven, who goes to hell. So no lives
Total
matter.
depravity. I don't even know if I can do all the tulip anymore. I used to be able to do the tulip, but
Right.
yeah, no, you all like. I remember asking my mom as a kid. I was like, okay, what about all the people who were born before Jesus was even born, who didn't have a chance to accept Jesus into their heart? She's like, oh, they all went to hell. Yeah, everyone deserves to go to hell. Like I was like,
Right.
oh my God. Yeah,
It's
that's a
inherently
lot to put
evil.
on a kid. Yeah, super evil, nothing good about you at all. So
What does that say? If a God all good can have the potential to create something totally inherently evil, totally
mm,
depraved.
yeah.
Like, it's taken me a lot of years just to like undo like that neuronal wiring around like my depravity, or just the assumption that all humanity is, always going to uh move towards corruption, move towards like destruction, and yeah, that there is inherent goodness in us outside of any religious belief is something that for years was not a conceivable thought for me, and while I know, like, yeah, my thoughts can be real dark sometimes, I also had to kind of come to realize, like, your thoughts are just like uh like um uh a roommate in your head, that those are not me. That those can like be as separate from me, like, it used to be that, again, I'm sure you grew up like um thought crime was a big thing, right? Like if you have any lustful
Yeah.
thoughts, like God sees all of your dark thoughts, and if you hate somebody and commit murder in your heart, you've basically committed murder in real life. And just the absurdity of that, and just realizing, like, oh no, like, yeah, like I can have some real bleak dark thought about, I don't know, dying and from COVID and my pets eating me. It's like, no. And it's
Yes.
not, it doesn't have to be, you're like, really actually true to who I am as my core of like my integrity and my character. It's, yeah, Calvinism's the most fucked up kind of beliefs, like part of the Christian faith, I think, and then anything else, like,
Yeah, how did it even catch on? Like, I know one guy, probably like Calvin, was like, yeah, I have this weird thought that maybe everyone's total garbage and we all deserve to burn in hell. And then everyone was like, yeah, that seems right. But I feel like, and I've like gone through a lot, like with my mental health, and I've done like a shit ton of therapy and everything. And I just feel like what I've learned from that is like not only is it like that whole thought crime thing, is it just like kind of crazy, but it's like the if you have a feeling like you're super angry at someone and you just try to be like, oh, don't think about that. Don't ever think about like what you would like to do to this person in your darkest fantasies, because like that's a sin. Then like it actually kind of strengthens the thought in a way.
right,
Like if you're super angry at someone and you just think like in your mind, like, not that you would ever do this in real life, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so angry at this person. I wish I could just like hit them right now. And if you can just like greet that thought and just kind of accept it, like, yeah, I'm super angry and like I kind of wish I could hit this person. And I'm obviously not going to, but like in my mind, I can think about that for a second, and it's not going to hurt anybody in real life. And like, I don't know, it seems weird to me that God would care because I'm not actually
right,
doing it. But yeah.
yeah, yeah. I don't know, just the thought, just the inner person, the inner monologue is just so intriguing to me as a whole,
Mm,
because like, we live in a three-dimensional, well, four-dimensional world, as far as like we live in a three-dimensional space, but time is like the fourth dimension that
mm,
we as
mhm.
humans experience. So forward, backward, left, right, up, down. But our brains, our inner voice, like if we all just take a moment and say, pray for Micah, just that phrase,
Mm.
pray for Micah. If I say that in my head, I I hear it. So how do I hear something that I just imagined in my head?
Mm,
On top of like hearing something in my a voice in my head, um, I somehow heard it too. Does that make sense? Like I recognize
yeah.
it, and I consciously experience that voice in my head, and yet like the voice in my head is like the one thing that like transcends time. Like I can think back to childhood memories right now if I
Mm,
wanted to. Just take a trip back in my head to jumping on hay bales on my family farm or something, like even right now. And so the very person, that inner consciousness thing that we can't really, like, we live with that person every day, has the ability to transcend this three-dimensional, four-dimensional space of time.
mm,
And so
mhm,
it's something so sacred and beautiful. And that's why, like, I don't know about you, but I do like meditation, and
mm,
I try to practice like consciously being present, because it's like the time where my mind is not drifting to the past and the future, which is beautiful. And like you were saying, like when you're in meditation, you don't shame yourself when you go back in time, or you think about yesterday's conversation or a call you were on, or you just kind of like acknowledge it, and like a river, just kind of let that thought kind of gracefully flow back till you're back in the present. Because I think that, I don't know who said it, but basically we're the most like God in the constructual sense. We're most like God when we are in the present, because we are embodying both past and future now in a very like real, interdimensional space.
That's interesting.
Corporal. Yeah, I don't know. I just like, I find that just, again, maybe it's COVID and the delirium in my brain, but just, just the idea that like, I am not Micah here and now. I am the Micah who is here and now, but in like the power of the brain, or what I can do, I can float backwards, float forwards. And is that really me in the end of it? Is it, is it this roommate that I live with? Is it a mixture of, I don't know. So maybe there's a trinity inside of me, just like God. Just
yeah, I wonder about that. Like, that's like, I've done some work around that in therapy, like the different, like, I don't want to say like voices in your head, like you have
parts
like
work.
someone has, parts work, exactly. So it's like, like when you feel conflicted and be like, okay, yeah, there's a part of me who feels this way and a part of me who feels that way, and then there's like there's the part that is like a super critical terror person, like just like always criticizing you, always like, and that part is trying to keep you safe, but being like, don't ever talk and don't leave your house because someone's gonna not like you. And then there's like a really innocent part of you, like I kind of cringe at the phrase, but like an inner child part. And then there's this like higher part, like your, what you might call your best self, or like your loving parent that's inside you. And I'm like, I don't know, like maybe like when I was a kid, I would have called that the Holy Spirit. I don't know if I would call it that anymore, but like there's that part of you that just kind of knows and is like, I'm going to guide you through this life or whatever.
Yeah, it's powerful. Yeah, my therapist, we've talked about like being your own nurturer, and just that thought was so foreign to me, because I'm used to like this idea that, again, I am this depraved, amoral being. I need to like have an outside goodness, an outside force to nurture and cultivate the goodness in me, and to be your own internal parent, or like you said, like to recognize like there's parts of me that are like, yeah, there's like this real angsty, child that's immature and wants to like, slander this person or react in a certain way. And it's all just a mechanism for protection. It's all about just trying to protect like your inner ego and, the person that you are, which isn't a bad thing. I don't know. That's the other thing. Like I've been on, like, I don't know, there's this whole trend of people doing psychedelics and doing things where they're like trying to kill the ego, or trying to have ego death or what have you. And the reality is like, I'm entitled to have some ego to like me as a person exist, right? Like to deny that existence, that part of me now is not the goal in my mind, or that's like true ego death can happen when I die, like at that point I will accept that, like, it's time to relinquish the self, but until that moment happens, like this world, I'm allowed to exist as a self in this to some degree, to a various degree. But you realize that all these parts are just elements of yourself trying to protect yourself. And I don't know, it's just psychology, all of it shit just baffles me. Or just even think about like dreams in that regard, that there's literally a part of my brain that is creating a story, a narrative that surprises and scares the other side of my brain. Like, oh shit. there's a monster chasing me, or that sensation of flying, like just like
Yeah.
one part of my brain is creating that, the other part is reacting to it as like a secret, baffling moment, like when that monster is chasing you up the stairs and you wake up and you're kind of like been kind of running in your bed a little bit, like,
Yes.
like, how the fuck does my brain like do that?
My husband does this a lot. He like I think there's like a thing with people who like talk and move in their sleep, like it's some kind, I can't remember if it's like a genetic link or something, but my husband, he yells in his sleep and he runs in his sleep. And like the other week, like I could hear his legs swishing in the sheets, and then I could hear him like trying to yell, and it's like I was like shaking him, like I was like, "You're wake up, you're dreaming." And then he looked at me and he was like, "Yeah, no, in my dream, part of me knew that it was a dream and that I should scream, and then you would wake me up." I was like,
Wow.
that's crazy that you're like, yeah, there's so many
That
different
lucid
like levels
dreaming.
going
Oh
on.
my God.
Like, this
Yeah.
is not pleasant for me, by the way. I wish you would please
You're-
stop this. I am trying to sleep and you're screaming about bears, so not enjoyable.
yeah. Wow. Well, you know, uh, I wonder what happened to those bears, the
I don't
dreams.
why yeah, why we
Like, how
never
does our
see
brain
bears
create
in
that?
Seattle. Why bears?
Why bears? Just some kind
What
of
is that I mean, like, yeah, I don't know. The brain is it's crazy, and like, yeah, I think like learning for, I guess for me, I don't really meditate. I do journal. I feel like that kind of fits into that niche for me.
sure.
Um, but I feel like I'm trying to cultivate that that nurturing part of my brain, and a lot of it is figuring out how to like look at the past and like treat myself with compassion.
Mm.
Um, and like I in a weird way, I mean, like I think parenting while also like dealing with your own shit is often like kind of exhausting, but I do think like actually I figured out how to parent my kids before I have figured out how to parent myself, so now I'm trying to like take what I've like, how would I talk to my kids if they were like having a meltdown about their homework? Okay, how can I talk to myself when I'm having a meltdown because I'm overwhelmed with all my stuff I have to do? So um
That's
sometimes
good.
it helps. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't want to deal with any of us today. But
Trial and error, right?
yeah.
Yeah. I just have to. No, that's good. That's good, though. That's really good exercise, I think, just to
Mm.
give yourself that grace and empathy that, like, hey, like, I don't know. I'm not a parent other than to my fur babies, and that's not the same thing.
Mm.
I still like say goodnight to them, and I
Oh yeah.
talk to them, and they're my children, but I don't have like human children. um, but just the practice and exercise of like, hey, like my like children need cultivation and love, and so do I. And so if I'm denying that for myself, if you're not getting it, then how are you going to be able to give that to your kids? And so I don't know. I'm not one of those like, I don't know. I grew up in a church faith construct of like profess it till you get it kind of thing. Like
Oh yeah.
that like anything in the heavenly realm, if I just speak it and pray it hard enough, I
Mm.
can manifest it into my reality. And so I take that with a grain of salt, but I think that there's something that's powerful behind our
Mm.
intention, and versus just like what we actually linguistically understand or can comprehend. And so we do that to
Mm.
ourselves, right? Like if I speak negatively about myself, and if I focus on negative intentions, I'm going to produce negative outcomes in my life. Like that's just
Mm.
like a weird phenomenon that is going to happen in reality. Like it's not like if I tell myself I'm a failure over and over again, I'm going to magically just like publish a great novel or do like, what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
will focus your energy and intentions and your acts life actions based on your mental state. And so anyways, all that to say, the inner nurture is crucial, and so it's good that you're doing that, because I think that produces like better outcomes in our life to then pass down to our kids, like how we interact with our spouses or friends or people.
Yeah, and I think it's like I think, you know, my personality type and being the Enneagram 1, like I struggle a lot with like perfectionism. And I think for a long time I was just like, okay, well, if I listen to that critical inner voice that tells you like you're not good enough, you need to work more, you need to do this. If you're not, you haven't done this, like you're worthless. And like that voice can get results in some ways, but it's not, I don't know. I don't feel like it ever really works out in the long run. Like if you really push yourself by being really critical. And I think like I was thinking about this the other day too with like body image. Maybe that seems very random, but like I think a
No.
lot of people just
Yeah.
like look in the mirror and they're like, I look fucking terrible and I need to do this and I need to do that. And if I do those things, then I'll be more lovable. I'll be more acceptable or whatever. But like the trick is like that voice is never satisfied.
Right.
um, you know, you could, doesn't matter what you do. Like that voice is always going to say you're not enough. And so if you can like tap into that nurturing voice and be like, yeah, this is a goal I would like to achieve and I'm going to work on it. And I know I can't really control the outcome, but I'm going to do my best and I'm not going to like beat myself up to get there. If it doesn't happen, then like I will have to accept that. And I will, you know, it might be disappointing, but I'm going to like not abandon myself, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if this relates to your experience, but for me, you know, part of the cycle of um, having that negative voice that I am a worm, I'm nothing, you know, that kind of, again, from my religious upbringing, that it somehow made me more worthy to receive the good thing that I want to see for myself. That
Mhm.
if I can acknowledge the depravity or the you know the negative aspect of what's going on, then I can only get to the good thing until I basically um speak out or acknowledge like this. And it's not true, but it's like, yeah, the same thing with like your bot my bot I've had a lot of issues with like, yeah, being overweight and different things. And there's a cycle to it, right? That like
Mhm.
I don't deserve love or I don't deserve acceptance because, you know, and so I'll be self-deprecating all the time, right? And that's like how I deal with it, is like I try to be humorous about it, like, well, I'm just this chubby guy who different this, blah blah blah. And subconsciously though, I feel like, oh, I that's why I don't find love, or that's why I don't find you know, happiness or acceptance, is because weight issues or image issues. And it's taken me a lot of years to just like accept myself as like, not that I'm satisfied with my health, you know, or that with the things I do, you know, but accepting that like, hey, this is who I am. And
Mhm.
you know, I watch my 600-pound life and I'm like, well, it could be worse, you know. Just like
That's true.
just like everybody else in the world, it's like, well, it could always be worse, you know. But I don't know, just
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm making a good parallel between the
Mhm.
spiritual upbringing or what we, but just something about um just fixating on the lack of where I want to
Mhm.
be is not enough. It's not enough. And
Mhm.
it, like you said, that inner critic will always be trying to elevate me by um negative reinforcement, and it just never works. Like if it had worked, it would have worked by now, right?
Yeah.
And so I realized when I love myself, oh, I actually do better. Like when I go to the gym and I like have a good day where I eat healthy and stuff, that's like, okay, like when I feed that positivity in towards like my rhythm and routines, like I see better outcomes than when I'm just like, well, I'm just a fat piece of shit, you know.
Mhm.
Just like, no, like it doesn't work.
Yeah, and I think like I'm sorry, I'm like trying to put this thought together in my brain as you're talking. Like I think it kind of all circles like we're talking about um like the hypocrisy, like buying the tomato that was like not farmed ethically and then like you know feeling bad about your body and like you know believing that God wants you to like always be like I'm a piece of shit or whatever. Like I think um like, I think a lot of it maybe comes back to just being like, I am a human and humans make mistakes. And like, I guess the way I was raised a lot was like, yeah, you sin, every sin is equal. You told your mama a fib about doing the dishes. Like, that's the same as nailing Jesus's hands to the cross or whatever. And it's just like, maybe if we just say like, actually, no, like, you know, you fibbed and that was not great, but like, whatever, people do it. Like, just like being able to like, yeah, I don't know what that mentality is, but like, I feel like God was, when I was a kid, God was like this angry parent who was always ready to like punish you. And what if it was just kind of like, instead of being like, everything is sin, everything is black and white, this is all evil, just being like, okay, I don't know. Yeah, you did a thing. It could have been worse. I don't know. We're all trying to figure it out. Like, my kids lie to me all the time. And I'm like, yeah, I expected you were going to do that. I was a kid too. So I don't know. Maybe if I can be like this and I'm not God, maybe God can be a really awesome parent. But I don't know. I still have to figure out if I can believe that. So.
Sure. So tell me more about Heretic Hereafter, as far as like, you know, I know we've kind of talked a little bit about where you've come from as far as like the spiritual beliefs, but what does the hereafter look like for you? As far as I mean, I know we're all heretical according to our former upbringing, spiritual communities, you know, standards, right? We're always going to be the heretics. burn them, burn. But what does hereafter look like for you?
Yeah, I don't know, and that is a scary thing to admit. But yeah, I think what I am searching for and what I'm inviting people to kind of come on this like journey with me, I guess, is just, yeah, trying to figure out like what is going to be good for us spiritually next. So like, yeah, I don't know. Like there's some days where I wake up and I'm like, yeah, I'm a Christian. I believe most of what Christians believe. I think I call myself that. And there's days where I wake up, I'm like, I don't know if God is real. Sometimes it certainly seems like God is not real. And basically like, I just feel like I spent a lot of my spiritual life trying to fit myself into these boxes that never really fit. And I'm not willing to do that anymore. So I want to find, a spirituality that's like nurturing, a spirituality that is just authentic, where I don't feel like I have to hide parts of myself or parts of my past. I just, you know, I want to be honest. And I feel like if God is real, God can probably handle that. Even when I'm like, I think I wrote about in my Substack last week. I was like, yeah, I was at a Bible study one time and I was like, yeah, Jesus sounds like he's being a jerk. Why would he say this shit? I think it's pretty terrible. And I think that makes a lot of Christians deeply uncomfortable, but I'm hoping that Heretic Hereafter will be a place where we can say shit like that to each other and just be like, yeah, I mean, I can see why you think that. You know, if I agree, maybe I don't agree, but like, yeah, you know what? That is your honest reaction. And you know what? You do that.
Wow. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I always feel about that way with Paul. Like, you know, like there's a lot of shit that's like enigmatic about Jesus, or the things that are kind of feel, you know, the parables. Like, yeah, there might be some rich knowledge and shit with it. And then Paul comes along and I'm just like,
God.
oh my God, he says a lot of shitty things as far as like taking the next level of interpretation of what Jesus's message and everything's about. And don't question Paul. I mean, he only wrote like 2/3 of the New Testament, but we all just revere this guy like he's basically second Jesus. And it's like, you know, he's human, man. Like, and yeah. No, I think
Yeah.
that's good that you're providing space for that, because I'm sure you've experienced this too, that like when it came to questioning your faith, everyone was like, it's fine to question your faith, it's normal, but you need to do it within the confines and box of the Bible. Question everything within that realm. And if you start to drift or read other outside literature or things that are outside of scripture, then you're falling off the rails. You're falling away from doctrine. And that's
Yeah.
when you realize it's part of a brainwashing kind of cult, confining like restriction of like you can only question within the realms of this box, and that's not how we grow if we really want to,
Yeah, no, I think that's like 100% true. Like, I think a lot of questions and doubts make a lot of Christians really uncomfortable. Like, I think when I was like going to church regularly, I was like, there was a lot of cognitive dissonance in my life. And if somebody else mentioned something that I was unsure about, I felt threatened by it. And I was like,
Sure, same.
yeah, like why do these people or these institutions get to define who is a Christian, who's not, who is a this or who's a that? I mean, like, I don't know. Like I have a problem like with creeds and things too. I'm like, Jesus never said the Apostles' Creed. Like this was, made in like 300 AD by some people who were like, those people are heretics. They won't say these words. So like ignore them or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it frustrates so many spirit like Christian people I know who I'm like, name one time where Jesus said, I am God, and it's all these allusions to being God, or it's this like, but he never comes out and just says it bold face. Like he'll say, I'm the Son of Man, or I am, and I'm not, yeah. I don't know. There's this weird balance I have to hold these days as like a deconstruction kind of spiritual person, where there's a lot of truth to the Christian like narrative that I still like believe and hold space for in my heart, which is like, I really do believe like what you reap is what you sow. And when you love people, like you're going to reap that love back. And that's not like, that there should be unconditional love between, humans. And recognizing the divinity of our sacredness between each other, I think is powerful. And that's what I think Jesus was doing constantly, as far as like advocating for the marginalized and disenfranchised, and basically, doing almost like political stage or like street theater, where he do these, in a very artistic sense. I can see that and recognize it now where I'm at now as a person. And so there's always enough room for those in my faith construct, or how there's enough room for those people in my worldview, but there's not enough space for me in their worldview, as far as like, again, like you were saying, like, no, the creed, it was born of a Virgin Mary, and you have to say these things, and these are the center of the bullseye, kind of doctrinal issues that if you don't adhere to them, then you are not a Christian, and you're not a believer, and you are, X, Y, and Z. And just in some ways, my like spiritual beliefs have expanded. So I don't want to say far beyond, but just have expanded deeper into how I experience and relate to reality. And it's hard to relay that without having a formal doctrine or series of scriptures I can regurgitate to other people, Christians or other people of faith, and they just see it as like, oh, you're just picking and choosing. That's how they always see it. It's like you're just abiding by what you believe is, you're just deciding what your own religious beliefs are, and that's inherently, demonic or evil.
But they do that too. I mean, everybody does
for
that.
sure.
I mean, like the Bible contradicts itself. There's no way you can look at the Bible and be like, I have figured out what the Bible says. And it's like, no.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's so much like that I find enriching about reading the Bible, and so much, like you said, that's problematic. And it's not just like relating it to current standards. That's like, hey, if I lived back then and read this, I would be like, what? Like, oh, we should abolish and kill every, man, woman, and child and all of their oxen because they sacrifice children to the Baal gods. Like, what? Like, so you're telling me that the sin of child sacrifice should be met with killing all their children. And so just the absurdity of just like, and I like to think that, hey, if I grew up in this time period, I would have been different. But maybe I wouldn't have. I mean, it goes back to even to like examples of talking about um, Christians who were abolitionists, who were the forerunners of like fighting racism, like William Wilberforce and these other, people who their faith propelled them towards social action. They could see other people would use scripture as a justification for slavery. Like, see, this is why, Cain's mark or this sin is like what made them, these accursed race of people, and they are subject to the white person. And there are people who use scripture as like, even Philemon in like the book of the New Testament, where they're, basically justifying why slaves need to return back to their masters. And well, yeah, it gives me hope. Like, hey, that's great that there were like people of faith who were like at the forerunner, like, Harriet Tubman, all these people who like had to see God as something more than just this like caste system making deity, that decides who gets to ascend and who gets to like basically thrive here on earth. Like, it still makes me like it's still heartbreaking to me that to this day there are still people who are claiming to hold this Christian faith and are voting against gay marriage, right? Or these people who voted against like this same bill that we were just talking about earlier, like, or the Supreme Court, that, oh, my faith compels me to vote against interracial marriage because it's tied up with LGBTQ like marriage protection. Like, you don't see like the destructiveness of how you're wielding your quote unquote faith for that end, to meet that end. Like, and I don't know, it's just hard to fathom. And so then there's the whole, well, let's just throw religion out the window and just like be ourselves, and it's dogma and shit like that always produces racism and peer in empire and et cetera, et cetera. And it's, the reality is, even if we could erase every religion today, even if we could just somehow zero out, there's no Muslim, no Buddha, nothing, humans would still, we're such ritualistic beings, we would still create some kind of ritual system that helps us promote human well-being and devalue human being like wellness, and that's what's like, we're stuck with this. Like, that's the human condition. Like, our desire of looking at the stars and wondering, is there something more, will always propel one group of people to love and accept people's humanity and see our equality that needs to happen. And then inevitably we'll always have another group of people that will wield that knowledge or use that like dogma and that system of religious construct to devalue life, to devalue connection. Man, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. I feel like I was just on a big soapbox rant. Sorry.
I think it's really interesting. I think like I wonder, like, I think what little like sociology I studied in college a million years ago, like, we talked a lot about like in group, out group, and like how much people use just these different categories to say, like, here's the group of people I should care about, and here's the group of people I don't have to care about. And it's like a lot of times, yeah, like Christian, non-Christian, or yeah, like racial categories or class categories, or like these people live inside my neighborhood, I care about them, and I don't care about those other people. And I really think like a big project of humanity is just to figure out, like, to just not have anybody who's like in your out group, like just to see everybody as like, I mean, not that you can take care of everybody or like, you know, that you would want to like treat everybody exactly the same. Like I would certainly do a lot more for like my next door neighbor than I would for like, you know, maybe somebody who, like a stranger who lived across the country. Like just, you know, there's trust and things there. But like just to see like, yeah, everyone, they all have humanity. They all deserve to be listened to when they talk about their needs and to like have those needs honored in some way. But yeah, I do wonder, like, I have a lot of you know, relatives who are very conservative and very like evangelical still. And I don't like, you know, necessarily think that they are, and they're not bad people, but I do think like there's a different understanding of like who are the people in my group and who are not. Like, and I live in a neighborhood now, it's like there's a lot of people who don't speak the same language as me. And but I do like, I have kind of like affection for them because I'm like, well, you know, I see you around the neighborhood, and you know, maybe our kids go to school together, and like we're super different, maybe we can't even communicate, but like I have like in my mind, like that's they're part of my group. But like if one of my conservative relatives comes to visit me and they see like there's all these, you know, immigrants walking around my neighborhood, and they like, maybe for them that's like they're having some bias or something against those people, and like they don't see them as part of their group. And it's just like maybe just a project that we all have to work on to figure out, like, how do we stop thinking about people in these categories or in these groups? I don't know if that made any sense. But
100%. Have you I just watched this movie the other day. It's called Belfast. Yeah.
I haven't seen that yet.
It's based on the Troubles, is kind of it's like the late 1960s. Basically, for lack of better words, kind of a civil war happening in Northern Ireland. I think it happened in other parts of Ireland too, but this movie particularly follows like this story of this family in Belfast. And you know, my family's Irish, and so you know, it was just interesting to like look at the history of, you know, from the view of this narrative, this movie anyways. But during that, like the Troubles in Northern Ireland, it was literally communities would get an upheaval and fight each other based on if you're Catholic or Protestant, and it was kind of tied to politics. And so and I might be getting this backwards, but I'm pretty sure like Protestants were like separatists, which believed like Ireland should be its own country, and Catholics were, I think I'm actually flipping.
I think it might be back.
Yes,
I think the Catholics were want to be part of
Yes.
Ireland, maybe, and the Protestants want to be part of the UK. I think.
Yes.
I could be wrong.
Yes, I think you're right too. Yeah. I always
I know, it's
mix it up, but
confusing,
it's
right?
like basically it was a way to like use religion as a way to categorize like what you're describing. And it was just a beautiful movie as far as like has like, you know, a lot of deep hurt, and yet there was humor, and you know, and this family just like existing during this time, like, you know, at the end of the day, like during these times of civil war, civil unrest, like people still have to go to work. They still know Patrick, you know, so and so who lives across the street who was Catholic, and you know, but it was, you know, these powers that be who are forcing like this family to like, hey, you know, you're Protestants, that means you need to be on our side when the time comes, and we're gonna the revolution's coming. And just how much of that like narrative forcefulness is pushed on you based on cultural context. And so if you are totally fine with the Catholics living in your neighborhood, and yet like because it's wrapped up in all this political dogma, oh, you're either for us or against us kind of thing. And so I just feel like there's something very similar happening in the US right now when it comes to like if you are Republican or Democrat. Like I'll never forget, you know, a family relative, when I told them I had like voted for Hillary back in the day, they were like, so I'm assuming that means you're not a Christian anymore. And I'm like,
Oh my
what would make you
God.
think that? Well, Hillary's a Democrat who's against, being pro-life. They're for abortion. If they're for abortion, I'm assuming that's against the Bible. So that must mean that if you don't care about abortion, then you don't care about the Christian faith anymore. So you must not be a Christian. And just the walk that it took for that connection baffled me. Like, at that time I was still very much like, Christian ambivalent. I don't know. I wasn't like an anti like religious person at all. I was still very much probably a practicing Christian to their standards, but I believed in like, hey, like this is a better option than Trump, like that's who I'm trying to like, I'm fighting against. And I don't know, it's just interesting that because of these categorizations and definitions of what it means to be Christian and being tied so closely to political parties, it's got me scared. It's got me worried that like we're having something very similar forming, like what we saw in the Troubles, like that one day we could have whole neighborhoods that are like segregated again based on like Republican and Democrat, or with overturning Roe v. Wade, it could easily be pro-life versus pro-choice, and I'm not trying to be a warmongering, fear-mongering Civil War person, like, oh, we're heading towards Civil War, but it is just kind of like a reality that you see these people who are being radicalized, who are attacking Pelosi's husband, who are trying to kidnap governors. I can't remember what that story was, but
and Michigan, I think.
Michigan, yeah. And just like these are just like the symptoms kind of revealing themselves of like an underlying like force of nature that's happening, where people are like, hey, we have to, in order to stand for our faith or stand for our ideology and in complete like this deal, we have to. So I don't know, there's part of me that's like trying not to like have that like humanistic nihilism where it's like everybody's deprived and then everyone's gonna just it's kind of like history doesn't repeat itself but it rhymes kind of thing. Like that's what scares me, is like how do we really overcome these barriers when we feel like we make 5 steps forward in like racial progress or economic injustice, like solvency, like, and then it's reductive in the sense that like, oh, we have to, then it feels like society takes 10 steps backwards, because, well, we just need to tie this to a religious doctrine now, like if we can just tie it to something that's like divinely inspired of who is good and who is evil, then we can win our side.
Yeah, no, I think it is really scary. Like, when I heard about that Paul Pelosi thing, I was like, that's crazy. And then just the fact that, like, even in self-interest, the politicians weren't like, oh my God, we condemn this 100%. This is horrible. We need to all take a step back and look at our rhetoric. Like, people, like the Republicans were like immediately, like, not all of them, but there were a few that were like dunking on it. Just like, don't you have any like, imagine if that was your family that got attacked, or, Elon Musk. I mean, God, that's a whole other dumpster fire.
Yeah.
God almighty. But yeah, just, it does feel like a really crazy time. And I'm just, I don't know. You just got to like keep going and keep trying, I feel like. And yeah, I do feel like hopeful when I think about like people who are younger, like the Gen Zers and like my kids age. Like, I do feel like they are savvy, and they even those kids, I think about like the kids in Florida with like the Don't Say Gay bill, who were like protesting that. I'm like, these kids know what's up. They know that you are lying to them. Like, the internet is out there. They, even if you try to like censor what their teachers can teach. Like they can go online and, hopefully find out. I mean, there's also a lot of bad stuff online too, of course, but just like, I don't know. Like, I mean, I guess that's like my experience. I feel like growing up as a pretty evangelical, like, my mother was like, oh, evolution is a scam and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, eventually I think most people are like, this doesn't really make sense. This doesn't hold water. And hopefully the next generation, well, I don't know. maybe that's just applied just to be like, oh, no, the next generation, they'll sort it out. I wish our generation will sort it out, but
it's always the hope, right?
Yeah.
It'll be the next generation that solves energy crisis and the food shortages, and it's tough. I hear you, because on the one hand, we have a social responsibility to make the impacts and changes we can in the political, social spheres, but also I really do believe that every generation has limitations of blind side, like barriers for us to actually see. And so I do think it takes other outside the box thinking generations to again, it's so easy for me to be a critic of the boomers, but then when one day someone's going to be coming back to me and be like, well, all those years you had an Amazon Prime account and you were ordering shit and you were buying things, like, well, that's your social responsibility. You should have seen that. Well, I'm sorry. You're right. I really liked ordering my things and having them in 24 hours, And then, there might be robots that just take over everything anyways, and we don't really get a say in how, like you said, the Elon Musks, like the oligarchs of the world will just decide, So then that's where it feels weird, because it feels like I come full circle back to like my religious upbringing of like the one world government, and
oh, God.
it's probably not far off that the rich will just decide. They already are who's elected and who's running and this and that, and they're just puppets and their schemes, and it's like, and so that's where you realize, like, oh, okay, so a lot of this like end times like dark antichrist rhetoric was really just placeholder for the rich and wealthy and the oligarchs running everything. Like, okay, that's scary, yeah. Well, it's a dark note to leave it on, so I don't want to leave it there. But Katharine, what are some projects and stuff you're working on? I mean, we didn't even get into the fact that some of your writings have appeared in the Seattle Times and Scary Mommy and La Esprit literary review. Tell us about like what is it you're working on now, and what have you like? How has your journey like influenced your work previously?
I think I've written. I do some fiction. I do some writing about school integration and racial equity, and then also just done some like memoir and essay type stuff this year. And I think that's a lot of that is informed by my background in the weirdness that is like evangelical culture. And it's always funny to me, like just to like hang out with my friends who went to like state schools and be like, oh yeah, no, at Christian college, we didn't play beer pong. We, we knitted because we were like so horny and like couldn't kiss boys. So
it's the only way to keep our hands busy. Just like the only way to keep us from doing bad things. It's like vigorously knitting.
Knitting. I don't know what the boys did, but there's something like an anti-masturbation program I'm sure they had as well. So like, I'm just mining that for as much comedy gold as I can get out of it. And
allegedly that's why soccer was made. I again take that as a truth or fact or false, but apparently the whole no hands in the sports, it was like it was to teach kids how to like
don't touch your penis.
Don't touch your penis. Just vigorously kick the ball, but don't touch the ball,
Yeah, it's like Irish step dancing too, like no hands, no arms, just legs. Think of pure thoughts. I don't know. No, don't move your hips.
Okay, sorry, I got a dumb Baptist joke for you. A dumb Baptist joke for you. So, why don't Baptists have sex standing up?
Because it can lead to dancing.
Because it looks too much like dancing.
So my college was actually a Free Methodist college, and we used to say this about the Free Methodists because because I started college in 2003. I think they only legalized dancing at my college in like 2000. So like, it was bad. It was a lot. But yeah, so I don't know. I'm just trying to like ride my religious trauma as far as it'll take me. And if folks want to join me on that journey, they can check out this Substack. I think it's Heretic Hereafter. Substack.com. I'm on Twitter. If that does not explode in the next 3 days, I'm at Real Strange Katie, Katy. But yeah,
hey, you gotta get that blue check mark. You're gonna pay for the $8 to have the blue check mark, and then have to get another official check mark that you're officially, Katharine Strange.
It does look like a scam, but I did click on something the other day, and it said that if you had Twitter Blue, you could edit your tweets, and I was like, oh man. I mean, I don't want to give Elon Musk any more money, but like, part of me was tempted, like, because if you could edit, I could erase so many embarrassing typos.
Sure, right.
It would be good. Yeah.
Yeah, he calls it the great democratization of Twitter, and it's like, well, you should just make it to where we can all edit our tweets, but no, you have to pay for that.
And he just let Trump back on the platform this morning.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Ugh. I don't know. Well, I don't know how much longer that's gonna last, but I'm on there at least as of today.
So what is Substack? I actually had never heard of it until I saw your bio or you gave me the link to Heretic Hereafter. So what's Substack? What's that platform like?
Yeah. So that is it's really exciting, I think, for a lot of writers who are trying to build their own audience and like own your audience. Well, not own your audience, that sounds weird. But like if you're on Twitter or something like that, you're very beholden to the algorithms. But Substack is long story long, it is a email newsletter platform, and then also your newsletters are all posted on the website. So like if someone subscribes tomorrow to Heretic Hereafter and they want to go back and read the like 2 posts I put up already, they're online, and you can interact, comment. They even have a chat feature now that's only for iPhone users, and I'm a poor person who has an Android, so I don't know when they're finally gonna roll that out. But it's nice because and also people can I'm not charging for my Substack currently, but people can monetize it. So it's an exciting way for writers to feel like I'm in touch with my audience. I can monetize this and potentially make some money off it because I wrote for Medium for a while, and their payment policies are always changing. So it can be really hard to find a home for your work and that is going to pay you. So Substack's really exciting. There's I think it's like the new podcasting. There's like 8 billion people writing Substacks now.
No way. Wow.
Yeah. But, and I'm subscribed to a bunch of them, but it's fun. I always like listening to podcasts, but I feel like I'm better when I have time to edit myself. So I don't know if I'd ever want to host my own podcast, but I'm thrilled to be a guest on your podcast. And people can find me on there, and I will edit my things and make my sentences make sense.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I'd heard of Medium. I've had folks recommend that I check it out. But I hadn't heard of Substack, so I was glad to be able to hear it. And we can also find you at katharineStrange.com. I have a website there. Your Twitter account is Real Strange Katie.
Yes.
That's I like that. And your last name really is strange, right? It's not just like a writer's artistic choice.
I married into the Stranges, and it was like such a gift as a writer. Yeah.
That's fun. I love that. Well, thanks for being here, Katharine. And everybody check out the Heretic Hereafter on Substack. And and until next time.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining me for the Pray for Micah podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review, and check out my YouTube channel and follow me on social media. Pray for Micah Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. We'll see you next time.
You are now re-entering the normal world.